The information provided in this podcast is for general knowledge and informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional for diagnosis and treatment of any medical condition. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Unplugged Healthcast or Dr. Wall.
For about 6 years,
Wow.
I would sit up 3 times a night in a chair because if I laid flat, the acid reflux would be so bad that I would leap out of bed at night because it was coming up in my throat. So I went in, got scoped. The doc said, I think you have esophageal cancer.
Wow.
He says, well, just get your affairs in order because there's really nothing you can do. And at the time, I've got 3 boys, 6, 5, and 2. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to just lay down. I'm going to fight. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I can, at the end of the day, I've done what I'm supposed to do to make a difference.
Neck pain, backaches, headaches, fatigue, the list goes on, and you're likely on it. Tired of the broken system and big pharma? We offer logical solutions, teach you to think critically, and empower you to reclaim your health. Welcome to the Unplugged Healthcast with Dr. Kevin Wall.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Unplugged Healthcast. I am your host, Dr. Kevin Wall. I've got a story of healing, hope, and a story of survival. Stage 4 esophageal cancer. The rate of life after 5 years is less than 1%. I have the 1%er here with us today to not only tell you his story, but to give you hope for your story. But before we go to our guest, I have to start with a story of my own. I talked about indigestion in a prior podcast, and I said there are 7 to 8 different ways that your body need to have function correctly for you to digest your food correctly. Number 1. Eat fruits and vegetables raw. Those have natural enzymes in them to help you digest your food. If you eat canned, bottled, bagged, or preserved foods, those will decrease your digestive process. Number 2, chewing. That's the way you take macromolecules like steak into micromolecules like amino acids that your body can digest and ingest and use for energy and for your body's repairing cycle. So chew longer, 20 to 40 times is what they recommend you chewing your food before you swallow. Number 3, your body has to have the correct amount of acid. That if your body is having too much acid, taking acid-reducing medications actually increases your indigestion. It reduces your body to digest correctly. So taking Tums and Prilosec, that actually makes your indigestion worse. It actually reduces your acid levels. I get you have high acid in your stomach, but that's because the other 7 or 8 processes needed are so bad that your acid is increasing as a compensation. So if you need to reduce your acid reflux, do something as simple as drink 6 to 8 ounces of warm water with lemon in it every morning as the first thing you do. Have apple cider vinegar as a supplement or take a shot of apple cider vinegar every day, a couple times a day, and that will help reduce the acid in your stomach. Okay, next one is you need your gallbladder to digest food. It stores bile, which helps you break down fats, and without it, your body cannot break down fat correctly. So if your gallbladder is sluggish or you happen to remove it, then you're in trouble. If you still have your gallbladder, you need to do a gallbladder flush, a liver flush, get your gallbladder functioning. If you don't have a gallbladder, you need to take enzymes for breaking down fat. Lipase is an enzyme you need to take for breaking down fat. Okay, the next one is you need a healthy amount of bacteria. There are over 500, they say towards 1,000 different strains of bacteria in your gut. You need to have healthy, good bacteria, probiotics, and you need to increase your intake of things like cultured yogurt, not the Yoplait that has too much sugar. You need to take sauerkraut. Sauerkraut has good culture. Cultured food, foods that have been fermented, help increase the normal bacteria in your gut. And the last one is motility. Motility in your stomach and motility in your intestinal tract. That is the churning, the movement of your stomach and the intestinal tract to help move and break down the slurry, the food, down into such a micromolecule that it can be absorbed through the villi in your intestinal tract. Increase your exercise. That helps motility. But the number one thing to help your digestive system have more motility is to get chiropractic care. The nerves in your middle back control your stomach, smooth muscles, and the intestinal motility. So if your posture is bad and your middle back is abnormal, you have middle back pain or back pain in general, that's a classic precursor to having bad digestion. Chiropractic helps subluxations, which help your body digest food. If the nerves are communicating more correctly to the organs, you can digest your food more effectively. All right, there's 7 ways to help your digestive process be better and reduce your indigestion. But remember, 44% of people having indigestion is an epidemic today. That's the fact. If you're one of those 44%, Prilosec, Tums are not your solution. That actually is the precursor for our story today. Let's go tell the story. All right. Well, here we go. The story of survival. How do you survive stage 4 cancer? Very few people around to tell you this story. Let me introduce to you my friend, the 1%er that has survived. Ken Widner, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, you are definitely in a category of people not only surviving stage 4 cancer, but here you are over 20 years later, I think, correct?
Absolutely. I just celebrated 20 years from my diagnosis just a month ago.
And I am right in my research that the survival rate past 5 years is less than 1% or somewhere around there?
That is correct. That
Wow.
is correct.
Prior to you receiving the diagnosis for cancer, what was maybe life prior leading up to that people could learn from and maybe understand not to do?
Well, basically, I had a lifestyle that I had 3 small kids, a busy lifestyle, on the go all the time, not eating real healthy. And I had a body that was kind of rejecting the food I was eating. I was having indigestion all the time. And I was getting concerned because I was taking Tums and I was doing over-the-counter Prilosec. So I actually went to the doctor multiple times, and they said, it's just acid reflux. Change your diet a little bit. Don't eat so much. And it just continued to get worse and worse, where actually for about 6 years,
Wow.
I would sit up 3 times a night in our den in a chair, because if I laid flat, the acid reflux would be so bad that I would leap out of bed at night because it was coming up in my throat. So, but I just did that for a long time. And then finally, I always have worked out, and I kind of thought, well, maybe I have a hiatal hernia. So I need to go in and probably get scoped. That's probably what's causing the acid reflux.
So a lot of you out there are dealing with this exact same thing. Right now, 44% of Americans today are dealing with the symptoms of gastroesophageal reflux disease or acid reflux. And you're just taking the Tums, the Prilosec, and I'm pleading to you. This is not a solution. This is black spray paint on your red oil light and wondering why your transmission drops and your car just continues to falter. So you did this for over 6 years. Tell us what happened when you went in to get scoped.
Well, first, prior to that, before I went in to get scoped, I was just still trying to manage through the Prilosec, Tums, and so on. I had lunch with a good friend of mine, and during my meal, I realized I couldn't really swallow. I was kind of choking when I swallowed. Wow. So I figured, well, that hiatal hernia must be really bad, so I need to go in and get it taken care of. So I went in, got scoped, and when I came out of the, because they kind of put you in that twilight, I came out, and the doc said, I think you have esophageal cancer.
Wow.
And I sat there, I said, no, I probably have a hiatal hernia. That's what I think it is. He goes, no, I really do think it's cancer. 3 weeks later, I found myself in surgery at Mayo Hospital for major surgery for for my cancer, and 2 very significant bouts of chemo and radiation. And that was, 20 years ago.
Okay, well, I'm picturing a lot of people out there because everyone knows somebody who has cancer, dealt with cancer, maybe lost somebody from cancer, or were concerned about this disease called cancer. And here you are in the midst of it. I can only imagine mentally you were just probably, as you say, on a roller coaster. I'm picturing you're reeling. You get the cancer surgery and the radiation and the chemotherapy. Did you do all of that?
I did all of that, had 2 bouts, and then, I get home, and then the reality hits you. What do I do now? I've gone through the surgery, I've gone through that, and you're in a state of just disbelief. The energy's been obviously zapped from you, and you just have to start thinking about, how am I going to deal with this? And there's a lot of factors for me personally. My faith is first and foremost the thing that I really leaned into, because that's where I know that God's in control, and I need to just lean into that. And then I started doing as much research about what I can do at that point. So I was spending time talking to a good friend. A good friend of mine graduated from Harvard Medical School. He's been the head of research at Stanford for 25 years. And he just told me, he goes, attitude is everything. He said, we can't quantify it, but we know that cancer patients who have a great attitude going through the treatment or whatever they're going to do, the lifestyle, they survive a lot longer and they have a better chance of making it versus those who are kind of just down and depressed. So I made a conscious effort initially to lean into my faith and try to be positive. And some days, that's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not an easy thing to do when you don't have cancer. Let alone the fact that you're ravished, chemo, radiation. I think when I knew you at some point, you were a 300-pound weightlifting football player. And at this point, after this, I think when you got cancer, you were at 250?
About 250, 260. I was one of those fit, fat kind of guys where I carried a lot of extra weight, but I was in the gym all the time, lifting and running, and I did some 10K races. But I was probably 260 before I was diagnosed and before I went through all my treatments.
And now you're into radiation chemo, and I think you told me at 180 or something like that.
180, went out and would meet people that I had been a part of my life for decades, and they'd walk right by me and not recognize me because of how much weight I lost.
Okay, well, we're not going to stay in this story very long because this isn't the end of the story, as you may have thought for many and most. But so there was a difference. And right now there's 2 things you did different that everyone should listen to. First off, that there's a greater power. You knew it. I know it. They need to lean into it and they need to figure that out because it was one thing that pulled you through. The second thing is just the positive approach of life and attitude. But I know from there, though, there was other things you did that took you from that point past the 1%.
What I realized is nutrition. And, you spend so much time doing research, what's going on? How did I get this cancer? I wasn't a smoker, just kind of a social drinker, but it was all tied into my diet, my nutrition. And I looked and started really digesting the benefits and the dynamics of intermittent fasting. And I realized that cancer cells, I'm not a doctor, but cancer cells need sugar to grow and survive. And if you can starve the cancer by not having sugar, then you start looking at what you're eating, even though you think it's healthy, there's sugar everywhere.
Pain holding you back? AFC Physical Medicine and Chiropractic Centers of Phoenix have real solutions to get your life back. With 9 valley-wide locations, we offer integrated care including chiropractic, medical, and nutritional support. Our approach goes beyond prescriptions, combining therapies to help you thrive. Don't let pain define your story. Take the first step towards living life to its fullest. Call us now at 480-210-6103 or visit afcchiropractic.com to schedule your appointment.
So I started making a conscious effort to do intermittent fasting, which is basically 16 to 18 hours I would go. And then once a month I would do a 2 or 3 day just water fast. It's all technical stuff, but there's a term called autophagy. That's my favorite word, because that's basically your body's ability to just go in and kind of clean up disease cells. And if there's cancer cells there, they use that for energy. So I really leaned into the aspect of intermittent fasting. And then along with that, I said, I've always been somebody who lived in the gym, who always worked out. And I said, I got to get back in the gym. I got to work out. I got to get stronger. So I spent probably 4 or 5 days a week in the gym. And initially, it was not a good experience because I was so depleted. But then I just worked on it each day.
Now, someone listening to that, the concept of intermittent fasting is a hot topic, and a lot of people know there's benefits to it. I don't think people would relate it to cancer treatment and the prevention thereof, but there's a lot of science, and what you said isn't your belief, and being a doctor or not doctor doesn't stop the fact that cancer does proliferate in a sugar high carbohydrate diet for sure. And the more simple sugars and some of the processed sugars are really facilitating that. You look at the cancer increase over the last 40 years, it goes right along with things like high fructose corn syrup, the increase of sugar intake, and the access to sugary sweets and sugar things. It seems like there's a correlation, and you saw that.
Absolutely. So I looked at, and I was never a person who would go to the store and look at labels and see how much sugar is there, but they're hidden everywhere. And there's different words and things I learned to kind of be real selective when I was purchasing things. And of course, you don't do it perfectly all the time. You have those days where you probably don't eat the way you should, but I was trying to stay consistent with my nutrition, my positive attitude, leaning into my faith, because what happens, and it's a story of hope for anyone out there who's really struggling with that right now, is just lean into the fact that, if you do everything you can do, there is hope. And I am one of those guys. In fact, the funny story is we did a post-op about 2 years after my cancer, and the nurse was taking my information, and I told her, and she said, previous surgeries? And I said, well, I had stage 4 esophageal cancer. And she stopped writing, and she looked at me, she goes, so you're the one. And I said, what are you talking about? She goes, you're the one that survived. And we had a 10-minute conversation about how did you do it? And it's a lot of the things we're talking about right now.
About a year and a half in the 2-year process, Ken was a patient of mine sporadically, kind of when you were in severe need, you'd come in and we'd treat you and try to encourage you to come back a little more often. But that's not the story. The story is here 2 years later, you and I had a conversation about liver detoxification, and I've got a podcast about this. And a lot of you guys are maybe not listening, think this isn't relevant. I'm going to wait, or you're not a cancer survivor. You're not a cancer victim. You're not even thinking you'll get cancer. But right now I can tell you the science is out there. Every one of you have cancer cells today. It's just true. No one's arguing this. There's all kinds of research to prove that. It's whether or not the cancer cells have the environment. There's enough dead and dying tissue. There's enough toxins, or your body's not healthy enough. And all of a sudden, the cancer cells start duplicating, multiplying, progressing, and they group up into what is called a tumorous scenario, and then they metastasize. So to prevent cancer or to recover from cancer, you have to understand your liver's a vital part of this. So I recommended you do basically a 6-month detox. And where was this in the timeline? Because I've lost track.
Well, it seems to me it was about a year and a half after, I was coming in for some adjustments and stuff like that. And we started talking about cancer and basically how your body's holding on to all these toxins and these metals, and, you need to get flushed out and get clean. So it was about a year and a half into the program, and it was an interesting journey. But I can honestly say that going through that process, I could just tell my body was just getting rid of a lot of bad stuff that I've been holding on to, even if you're doing some intermittent fasting a little bit, which works well.
Yep.
But this is a way to really clean out your body. So it was a rough, expensive 6 months, but it was certainly worth it.
If you do the typical allopathic post-cancer treatment, what did they tell you to do that I assume most people probably just do that?
Well, they didn't really say anything about anything other than they handed you a chart and said, these are the kind of things that you can probably eat now. But it was never anything about being proactive or doing exercising or anything, just, kind of hang in there, do the best you can. This is behind you. It's going to take a while to heal, but there was never any proactive, here's the steps you can take to prevent this from coming back. And so there was really no guidelines or no map to follow.
Because there was no hope.
Right.
And this is the one thing that we're going to talk about here as we wrap this up a little bit. The 10 things that you could do to actually not only prevent, but survive cancer. And I think the first thing is in the category of mental attitude. But I'm going to take that a little further, which is often we have been limited by what has happened to us or others around us in the past. We get a prognosis, we get a diagnosis, we get in this case a bit of a death sentence, and we just buy it. We just assume it's true. We believe that the body can only heal this far, and that's it. You didn't believe that. I didn't believe that. I know we talked about this, and that's why I said, man, we got to do everything because your body can repair itself if it's able to. Get the junk out, get the crap out, give your body what it needs. It goes back to the core value of this podcast, which is food, water, and sunlight makes healthy plants. Oxycodone, Diet Coke, Taco Bell, Prilosec, ibuprofen, toxins, preservatives, bad food, bad air, bad water. Those things build up. But you had a mental approach and you were given a diagnosis that said you couldn't live, pretty much. Didn't they tell you that almost?
Absolutely. I went to my oncologist after the surgery and I said, well, what do I do? What if the cancer comes back? He says, well, just get your affairs in order because there's really nothing you can do. And at the time, I've got 3 boys, 6, 5, and 2. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to just lay down. I'm going to fight. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I can, at the end of the day, I've done what I'm supposed to do to make a difference.
Don't accept the prognosis as the death sentence. We're not saying the doctor's wrong. I'm just saying the belief system of what your body can do may not be true. What would you say, Ken, would be one of the top 10 things they can do to not or prevent or survive?
Well, we've talked about it a little bit, but I would definitely do some intermittent fasting. I would definitely do what you could to make sure that you're eliminating as much sugar out of your diet as possible, because the sugar is what cancer grows on. So that would be first and foremost what I would do. And I would also say strength training. My research, which is obviously limited, there's a correlation between survivability and ability for your body to fight and how much muscle mass you have. So I'm 68 years old, and I was 48 when I was diagnosed. But I came today before this. I was in the gym doing kind of a hardcore bodybuilder workout with a little bit of cardio after, and that has changed my life. Being able to work out, stay strong, carry the muscle mass with my intermittent fasting and diet I think those are the critical pieces to have a chance of survivability.
You were 183 pounds and you're saying I got to go build muscle mass. And a lot of people are probably dealing with that and wondering, how do I get there? How did you start back at the gym and get enough strength? Were you eating a lot of protein? You're doing intermittent fasting, which seems to be a logic because you're 183 pounds, and you're in the gym, which seems to be impossible because you're 183 pounds. How do they do that? How'd you do it?
Well, basically, through my research, I found out, which was kind of counterintuitive, when you do intermittent fasting and you lift, you actually build muscle more so sometimes than even if you're eating. So it was a kind of a fascinating facet for me. So I just did a nice balanced diet when I was eating in my eating window, making sure I was getting plenty of protein. I was taking, some supplements and some things to, vitamins and things that I thought my body might need as well. But just started slowly. I got a personal trainer and said, here's where I am, here's where I want to be. Help me. So I think an investment in somebody who has the knowledge in the gym, how to build muscle. I played football in college, so I had a kind of a baseline to understanding the dynamics of lifting and how you go about putting a program together. But I also would lean into those who have more experience training people one-on-one. So that's kind of what I did, but making sure that I had enough nutrition as well.
Infrared saunas or red light. We're going to do a podcast on what's called photonutrition. A lot of us don't understand the benefits of the sun, the benefits of red light. We're so photophobic that we put sunscreens and stuff, but there's benefits to the good lights. Did you do any type of that stuff in the process?
Well, when I had my trainer, he suggested some of that. So I did a little bit of that. I did some saunas, some dry saunas, and tried to, again, with the mindset of trying to flush out any toxins in my body.
Yeah.
Doing everything I could as far as drinking lots of water, saunas, and did do some of that therapy as well.
Vitamin C, in fact, that detox that you did, that 6-month ones that I put you on, if you remember how much vitamin C you were taking, it was mass amounts of non-buffered vitamin C.
Correct.
That in itself probably should have gave you some acid reflux, but it didn't, did it?
It did not.
Yeah. So here's the deal. When you buy vitamin C, you can't buy it at Costco. That is not going to work. In fact, what you need is a severe amount of vitamin C on a routine basis, and it has to be from a non-GMO source. Most vitamin C in America is made from corn. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
And most of the corn, and I grew up in Iowa, as I joke, detasseling all this corn, it is genetically modified, so it grows crazy high and severe amounts to just supposedly feed the world. But that genetically modified corn that they use to get ascorbic acid from is not able to be absorbed even close to the amount of vitamin C that comes from like organic beets. So I know beets are a great source. There's other sources out there, but you need to find non-GMO, and if possible, if your stomach can handle it, have non-buffered vitamin C, and your body will absorb it at a much higher rate, and it's phenomenal at fighting cancer. In fact, if you go down to Mexico and you see those facilities, most of them use either IVs of vitamin C. In fact, that was part of the recommendation. We could give you a oral non-buffered vitamin C from beets. That's what that vitamin C was from. Mm-hmm. Or you get IVs of vitamin C. You have to know you have cancer to a degree today. You should live this way, eat this way, fast this way, consider to treat your body this way, and do not let it catch up to you. Do you have any last recommendations for these folks who are listening, how to survive or beat or prevent cancer?
My encouragement is anybody out there who's fighting cancer, is in the middle of it, is struggling emotionally, understand there is hope. There is opportunity. There's the possibility for you to get cured if you are proactive and kind of do these things that we've talked about today. I think they're critical for everyone to do. And even if you don't have cancer or diagnosis, doing these things right now have a good chance of, in my opinion, of preventing you having cancer in the future.
Well, my last advice is if you're dealing with acid reflux, indigestion, stop taking the Tums. Stop taking the Prilosec. Stop just assuming the beta blockers or whatever they give you to stop the acid producing. That is not your solution. There's answers out there. Go back to one of our podcasts. Go see a naturopath. Find a chiropractor. Get better nutrition. You can fix your indigestion and acid reflux, but Prilosec is not the answer. That, unfortunately, seemed to be the precursor for you, and it could be for you. So here you go. You need to unplug from the matrix that's got you so confused. There's solutions out there, and there's hope for your healing. This is Dr. Wall and my good friend
Ken Widner,
telling you can survive things that you don't think you can, but you need to unplug from the typical system and the things that you've thought to be true. Come join us again. Come check us out on drkevinwall.com if you want more information. If you actually want to be a call on the show, if you want to get answers from us on the show, you need to go to our website, drkevinwall.com, and leave us a voicemail there, leave us a message, or let us know you want to be a caller on the show, and we'll bring you on and actually answer your questions live. That's kind of fun for you, and people learn from that. But this is Dr. Wall signing off from the Unplugged Healthcast. Be healthy, be safe, be blessed. We'll see you again soon.